My name is Ryan Schohr. I know I've met some of you over the last couple of months as I've begun this journey on my race for assembly here in the 3rd District. I've had a chance to speak in this room to some of you, but again, for those of you who don't, my name is Ryan Schohr. I'm a 6th generation California farmer and rancher. My family came here in 1861 from Germany, and I've been farming ever since. That's my business. That's what I do. That's what I love to do. That's who I am. That's what I want to continue to do. In that process, I've seen a lot of things happen to our state. A lot of things that have run a lot of people right out of business. I think a couple of you might have heard this the other day, but I had a chance to go into Napa Auto Parts. I laughed because somebody said Napa Valley. I said, no, Napa Auto Parts. And I picked up this auction bill, and it's for an online auction from Covanta Energy. It's an energy company that used wood in the cogeneration process. Well, I thought, what a travesty. Anybody's electric bills in here too high? Anybody think they need to go higher? They don't need to go higher. They're all too high. But yet California is running people right out of town. And that's a travesty to me. All the jobs that go with it, all the energy that's produced with it, those forklifts and trucks and tractors, all the people that would normally be driving them, all the goods and services that they would create, the money that would go back into the economy is lost. And why is that? Because policies in Sacramento and Washington affect lives of people on the ground here in Northern California. And that's a real problem. We've got to fix that. We've got to go to Sacramento with a message to reduce the size of our government, let common sense prevail in these rural areas that we live in, that we enjoy, that we recreate in, make sure good things can happen in our communities. We expect good schools, good roads, law enforcement that will come when we're in need. We've got to get back to the basics. Let me back up for just a second. I want to talk about why I decided to run for assembly. I was sitting around our conference table in our office with my dad, my brother. We were hiring this spring for folks to come and work on our farm. Met a gentleman named Mike. He's from out in east of Marysville in Butte County. He said, Ryan, I've got one problem. I said, Mike, what's that? He said, I don't have a driver's license. We were looking for somebody that could drive to our farm legally, of course, and drive our machines on the road or drive our equipment on the road if necessary. He said, the county took it away from me. I said, the county took your state driver's license away from me? How did that happen? He said, well, I fell behind on my child support. And I'm a big believer in families and honoring your commitment to your family, of course. But I said, well, what's the backstory? There's got to be another reason. He said, you're right. It involves trucks. I used to work for a trucking company out of Yuba City that had some financial trouble, went through some hard times, laid off a lot of people, really restructured their business. And he said, state regulations did that. I just rolled my eyes. Imagine that. State regulations forced a trucking company to slim down, lay people off. He said all these emissions things, all these requirements from CARB, the California Air Resources Board, that they're making us do to our trucks, they didn't have the money. They weren't making the money to do that. Those trucks were becoming worthless because nobody else could buy them either, because they weren't good for them. They're limiting the miles that we can drive on some of these trucks. So as a result, there was this guy in my office looking for a job, and he'd been looking for a job for a number of months, wanting to provide for his family. He couldn't even legally take his kids to the doctor, to school. I thought, what a travesty. This has got to change. We've got bureaucrats in Sacramento making these decisions. And it gives me goosebumps to tell you this story, because it's on and on and on and over that you see those types of things when you really look for them. You drive by our downtowns, the businesses are shuttered. People are having trouble. We have unemployment approaching 12% in some of these counties. And now we hear Sacramento wants more of our water. Just the other night, I was at a meeting with the Secretary of Resources, John Laird, talking about the twin tunnels. And he said, look, we don't want to take your water. You used the wrong word. And I said, well, convey. How about that? And he liked that a little better. And he said, but they're going to pay for it. I said, where are they going to get the water? And I don't think he really answered the question. And he said, there's just going to be $4 billion of habitat restoration that we're all going to have to pay for. So convey our water from Northern California, and then we're going to have to pay $4 billion for more habitat restoration. And I'm sure you're all familiar with how bonds work. If we spend $4 billion, the interest will cost us $4 billion, meaning the total cost is around $8 billion. And if we buy a bunch of ground, and there's talk in restoring the Delta that it might be 100,000 acres. If we buy that ground, who patrols it? We've got to send our game wardens out there. Now, my college roommate, as a matter of fact, is a game warden right here in western Tama County. He can tell you all kinds of crazy problems that they run into on state land. The management plans that go with it, patrolling it, it comes off the tax rolls, it comes out of production, they're not farming it, they're not growing anything, they're not trucking or processing or packaging or shipping those products out of here, bringing more money in. Instead, all that stops and it becomes a burden to our treasury. And that's got to stop. $4 billion just for habitat restoration. We talk about the twin tunnels. That could be upwards of $35 billion for 9,000 cubic feet per second to roll through a tunnel. How about we have the glass full of water before we have the straw? That's kind of my philosophy. I was on a tour of Sites Reservoir today, as a matter of fact, with some DWR officials, or what will potentially become Sites Reservoir, just west of the Interstate 5, west of Maxwell, over in the foothills. I think that could be quite a project for Northern California, because as we start diverting more water to Southern California, more water to habitat, there's more demand on water, obviously, from our growing cities, and judges saying the environment needs more water. We've got to come up with some more water here to keep our jobs, to keep our farms, to keep our communities going. And if we don't do that, we know what the consequences will be. So it's time we work on fixing some of those issues in California. That's what I want to go to Sacramento and do, is help facilitate projects like that. I've got a record of defending my industry. If you look in the Los Angeles Times, you look in the San Francisco Chronicle, you Google my name, and those newspapers, you'll see me defending agriculture and defending our communities. And that's what I want to do. I'm not using this as a stepping stone. I'm not a politician or a bureaucrat. I'm a farm boy. Grew up at the end of a gravel road 9 miles west of town, out in the country. I know what it's like when the state of California comes in, pays $11,000 for your neighbor's ground, and then all the critters come across the fence and eat my crop. I'm out there every night trying to protect that. And the state of California makes some decisions, says you might not have any water next year. They just announced a 5% delivery allocation for state water project contractors next year. What's that do? We rely more and more on groundwater. What's that do to the groundwater and domestic users and folks that have orchards that rely on water? I think that's a huge component of our economy that's being overlooked by Sacramento and by the bureaucrats there. We've got to rein that in. Somebody says, Ryan, how will you go to Sacramento and work with the Democrats? As a Republican, you'd be in the super minority, if you will. I said, number one, keep in mind, I'm a farmer. I work with Mother Nature. I don't care if you have a D or an R behind the end of your name. You've got to do good things. One of the stories I'd like to tell is when I talk with folks in Chico who might be from a little different persuasion, and I tell them, there's a lot we can agree on. They say, oh, really, Ryan? What's that? I said, I think it's a good idea to have schools that are good and our kids come out of there with the skills to compete in the 21st century economy, go on to university if they want to, get a job if they want to. We ought to have our homes and businesses protected by good law enforcement, have good roads. They said, well, absolutely. I said, if it's a good idea then to keep your money local and support local businesses, shop at the local Napa hardware store that Kent owns in Gridley, then how's it a good idea to send any more money to Sacramento or Washington because it just gets squandered? You see my point? If it's a good idea to invest locally and make sure there's money here locally, it can't be a very good idea to send more money down there because we know what happens. It goes into a black hole. It goes into these bond projects that then they get bought or they get financed, and then the operations and maintenance goes on and on and on. Look at this train deal, another one. $1 billion for 20-something miles of track. Just north of it from Fresno, going north about 30 miles. If you do the math backwards on that $1 billion, it works out to over $500 per inch. $500 per inch just to build the track, not to acquire the land, not the operations, not the maintenance, not any of that. We've got to get a little more common sense back to Sacramento. We've got to have people that understand how it works in Sacramento to tell our story, that have the courage, the conviction, and the know-how to get things done, can stand on their own 2 feet. I know some of you heard me say this, that I want to come back to the farm, get in my pickup, get my boots on, get the shovel out, move water. Let's do things. Let's get growing crops. Let's do the good things for our communities. That's who I am. That's what it's all about. I want to do this to make sure that there's an opportunity for another generation to continue, because at the rate we're going, I think we've got some serious challenges ahead, some serious problems in this state. I think we can do good work down there. Our forefathers fought, many of them died for us to have the freedoms that we do. And we know freedom isn't free. We've got to fight to keep it. And that's important. We've got to send people to Sacramento or to Washington, have their head on their shoulders, their feet planted firmly on the ground, and are willing to go to work and get things done and come home and live underneath the laws that they create. And it's not just the laws that are created underneath the dome of the Capitol in Sacramento. Because we all know that Sacramento is full of bureaucracies, boards, commissions, bureaus. The list goes on and on and on. Those are where regulations are dreamt up and imposed on all of us that have some serious consequences. Just as bad as what comes out of the legislature in many cases. I had a chance to have lunch not too long ago with George Runner. He serves on the Board of Equalization. He told me a story that I was just appalled. He said the state of California is sitting on a fund totaling $250 million of taxpayer money. They're just sitting on it. I said, they've got $250 million of our money? He said, Ryan, it gets worse than that. What that is from business owners who put on their form to the Board of Equalization that they intend to collect sales taxes, essentially an agent of the government, a tax collector. And if you anticipate strong sales, you're required to put so much of those anticipated sales and the taxes that it will generate in a fund in Sacramento. So that fund today totals $250 million. Wouldn't that money be better served in our communities? Better served in our schools? Better served in law enforcement, keeping criminals who've got this AB 109 thing? That money be much better served locally. He said it's even worse, Ryan, because the program costs $250,000 to administer. $250,000. But you know what? The whole cost of the program is only $500,000. So we're worried about people skipping out on paying their taxes, but we're sitting on $250 million to cover $500,000. That's a big difference. I'd rather have that $250 million back in the pockets of the people where it belongs. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to rein in those bureaucracies. And for reference, I encourage you to go to the Board of Equalization's website and look at the list of taxes and fees and things that they collect right out of here, right out of our communities, and put someplace else. So those are some of the things about me that I think are important for you to recognize. There are some differences. I'm excited to go to Sacramento. I think there are some good things that lie ahead for this state if we can make them happen in Sacramento. We've got to work across the aisle. We've got to reach out to those bureaucrats. We've got to bring them here so that they understand our concerns, so that they hear our voices, because for far too long, they have not. Would you agree? Yeah. We've been underrepresented here. And that's something you all know, I know. And you're working hard to change that, and I applaud your service. And I want to mention just one story. If you look on the back of a quarter, and it's the Delaware quarter. The state of Delaware has a quarter. There's a guy riding a horse on that quarter. When the Declaration of Independence was being discussed in Independence Hall in Philadelphia, there was a tie vote whether to break free from England or not. And a gentleman from Delaware had 3 delegates. A gentleman from Delaware was asked to cast one of the deciding votes, so they sent a message to him in Delaware to get to Philadelphia immediately. He rode through the night, through a storm, came to Philadelphia, cast the deciding vote so that our country could have independence. So that's my story, that one vote does in fact matter. So that everybody that you or I touch and can encourage them to vote, to understand what's going on in our state and our country and how it matters, really can make a difference. So I'm excited to go to Sacramento, be one vote, but a voice for everybody in Northern California, voice of common sense, somebody that knows what it takes to run a business, to hire people, because I just can't imagine hearing more of those stories come across my table, come across my conference table, that people out of work because of regulations from our state. Another company I deal with said, Ryan, we'll do business with you anywhere, just not California. We should have a different attitude. The company was based in Kansas City, Missouri. He said, literally, we'll do business with you in Egypt, the other 47 continental United States, whatever it might be, just not California. We've got to change that mentality so that our students can have jobs, so that there's a future here in Northern California. So that's me. That's what I'm all about. Patty, have I used my time? Are we doing good?
5 minutes if you want to cover anything else.
You know, I think that this crowd can ascertain who I am. Is there any question about who I am or what I stand for here? Yes.
I have one question.
Do you mind, Patty, if we do a...
We'd rather
Okay, she wants to do it a little later. Well, again, thank you so very much. Write your question down so you don't forget what they are. I want to go to Sacramento, work on water. That's important. And I want to leave you with something that I think really sums up who I am. We need less taxes and fees, more water and jobs. I think it kind of works out like that. Less taxes and fees, more water, and more jobs. And I don't want to be the politician that stands up here and talks about how I can create all kinds of jobs, because politicians often don't sign the front of the check. It's not their business that's on the top of that check. We've got to get people that are willing to invest in our communities, to invest in our state, not run them out of here. So again, less taxes and fees, more water and jobs. And with that, my wife Holly just walked in. So I want to introduce you to my wife. She's an epidemiologist. Don't ask me how to spell that, but it's studying epidemics and how they spread and preventing problems from happening, and deals with bioterrorism and all kinds of fun stuff. So public health is pretty important in our house as well. Again, one of those things is common sense. And I don't think this Affordable Care Act is really all that affordable. So we've got to get back to the basics a little bit, and I'm thrilled to have Holly here for those of you that haven't met her, to get a chance to meet her. She also gets out there on the tractor. She drives bank out for me when I'm harvesting rice. She's out there hauling it to the edge of the field sometimes. It's fun to do it as a family. That's why I want to make sure that other families like mine, whether they're selling insurance, whether they want to grow up to be doctors or lawyers or whatever it is, that they have that same opportunity. That's really what it's all about. I think everybody at the front of this table would agree with that. So I look forward to serving you in Sacramento. It will be a privilege and an honor. I'm excited to take your questions tonight. I think there's good things that lie ahead for our state. I'm excited to work with all of you in this room to make those kind of things happen. 570-7926 is my number. 570-RYAN is what that works out to. When I went on my 570-7926, 570-RYAN. My wife remembers that from one of our first dates, because she said, your dad's is 570-CARL. She remembers that, and that's what it is. That's how our employees and my grandmother and grandpa could get a hold of us around at the field if something really wrong was going on. They knew how to get in touch with us. So please, feel free to use that. Use my email. That goes straight to me. I want to be a guy you can count on in Sacramento to get things done, to reach out, make sure that your voice is heard. Make sure we bring some common sense back to Sacramento, back to the bureaucracy, rein it in a little bit, do good things. So thank you so very much, Patty. Thank you for indulging me with your time tonight.